This past week, I had the privilege of sitting down through a Skype interview with someone who's putting into action compassion for the least of these, all the way in Mali, Africa, right? Pastor Stu? And this is actually someone who Stu knew through this trip that he went on back in November. I had not met her. Her name is Becky McCabe, and she's got this awesome ministry called Hands of Honor in Mali, Africa. And before the Skype interview that I did with her on Monday, I had no clue who she was, was never introduced to her, except for the president of something called c&ma Services. c&ma, C-A-M-A, is sort of like the relief arm of the Alliance, where, think about the Red Cross and all that they do. It's kind of like the Red Cross, but with a gospel emphasis. It's our Christian and Missionary Alliance's relief arm. They do a lot of really, really good stuff in the world when catastrophes hit, when tsunamis hit, when earthquakes hit. Also with prostitutes, with children being abused and sold into slavery. They do all kinds of stuff. And there's missionaries specifically put into those countries to help with these injustices. And c&ma is actually the sort of the relief arm that we support that helps put dents into those injustices. And so, didn't know Becky before this, but the president of c&ma, Mike Sohm, introduced me to her. He actually heard about the series that we're doing now through a mutual friend and called me and said, you've got to interview Becky because she's got such a great story. So this past Monday, we did a Skype interview all the way in Mali, Africa. It's 115 degrees where she was, which was interesting because right before I did the interview, I'm thinking like, man, my office is hot today. It's like 75 in my office, and it was like really hot. And then she said, yeah, it's like 115 here. I'm like, oh, okay. I got the fan going on me, you know. So anyways, this is a really cool interview I want you to watch, and then we'll close up with some thoughts.
Well, hey there, Becky. Thanks for joining us for church. At Crosstown. As I mentioned earlier, we're going through this series on the Beatitudes, and today's Beatitude is talking about hungering and thirsting for righteousness. All the wrong that we see in this world, we want to make right. Mm-hmm. We want to be able to get into people's skin and see the world that they see and help out in any way that we can as a church. And so that's the challenge for us today. And then Jesus says, blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. And so I was directed to you, didn't know you before this call, and by Mike Sohm from c&ma Services. And I've been just blessed to get to know you a little bit better, and I think our church will be blessed by getting to know you and your story. So with that said, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do with your ministry?
Okay. I'm an Alliance MK. I grew up in West Africa. My parents were Alliance missionaries. So my husband is an Alliance MK as well. We have 4 kids. We're serving in the country of Mali, which is in West Africa.
There you go.
And the Lord had always given me a passion to work with people. Like I love people, and particularly vulnerable teenage girls. And so when we arrived in our city that we're working in now, the Lord just through some miraculous doors opened an opportunity for us to begin ministering to vulnerable teenage girls in our community. And most of our girls are child laborers. So Mali's a very poor country. We're often in the top 10 poorest countries in the world. So we have a lot of poverty, and that means parents are sending their young children, like between the ages of 10 and 19, to work in the workforce. And so for our girls, that means that they're working in people's homes as maids. And so they're just very vulnerable to the realities of not knowing how to live in a big city and just different just the reality of living alone in a stranger's home as a young girl.
It's very difficult. One of the links that you sent me earlier, I was reading, Becky, that 59 million children are forced into child labor, which in that where you guys are, if that stat's correctly, it's 21% of the child population, which is crazy.
29%. Yeah, 29% of the world in sub-Saharan Africa has the highest percentage of child labor in the world. Sub-Saharan Africa does.
Wow.
And so a lot of our girls are in the workforce, and they're working as maids in people's homes. In Africa, manual labor is still very much a part of a daily life. You're still cooking over an open fire. You're still washing clothes by hand. You don't have a refrigerator, so you have to walk every day a couple miles to the nearest market that sells fresh food and groceries and things like that. So our girls do all that. And so our Hands of Honor program, the Lord just directed us to begin this preventative program in our community to kind of gather these girls, figure out who they are, what homes are they in, and kind of address some of the concerns that we are seeing in our community. In our local prison, the number one reason that girls land in our local prison is infanticide. And so they are murdering or abandoning their newborn babies. And so it's probably the girls that would be getting abortions in the States. Abortion is illegal here. They don't have that option. And so what ends up happening is they just go into labor and they panic. They know they can't go home. It's a shame-based culture with Islam. And so they cannot go home with a child. And so they just, when they go in labor, they panic, and they'll often just deliver their babies into the outdoor negins, which is like a hole in the ground is their toilets. And so in our prison, we actually started our work in the prison system, in our local prison, and we realized we had all of our girls were under the age of 20, and all of them had committed infanticide. And so they're just living with the guilt and the shame of making these desperate choices. And so we just really felt like, what can we do in our community? Where can we be preventative so that we don't see any more of these girls in our prison? Yeah. And so that's how Hands of Honor was birthed. And our focus, we have 3 focuses in our training that we do. We have a health focus, so malaria and typhoid and yellow fever and dysentery, they're all very, very common still in Mali. And so a lot of our health addresses things like that. We also address female genital mutilation, so FGM. I'm not sure if y'all are familiar with that, but it's basically circumcising women. Wow. And over 80% of Malian women have had this done to them, and all of our girls are as well. So in our training, we're addressing this with the girls, trying not to make them feel shame for having had this done to them, but the idea of educating them, please don't do this to your future generations, trying to teach them the effects of it. So we have a whole health component. We do a lot of our girls are unwed mothers. A lot of them are very promiscuous, so we have a whole abstinence program, a whole teaching on a biblical perspective on sex that we do with the girls, as well as we have an education focus, because in Mali, 33% of the people are illiterate. So just to give you an example, in the States, 99% of people can read and write. In Mali, only 33% of people can read and write. Wow. And that's an even lower statistic for women. So most of our girls have never had a day of school in their lives. And so we have a whole literacy teacher, a great Christian gal that becomes a mother to the girls and a real mentor to them, and she teaches them to read and write. And then we also have a vocational skill set in our program where we're just really trying to teach the girls what's a skill or a trade that we can teach them that kind of gives them an opportunity for work, for employment, and a skill set that they can use in their future lives.
Sure. So this is called Hands of Honor, right?
Hands of Honor, yeah. And it was the idea from Proverbs 31, and that we've called a woman of honor, and the idea that we want our girls, because they aren't women of honor. I mean, they have a reputation, the house girls in our community, of being promiscuous, of being troublemakers, of being rebels. Yeah. And so we just want to change that definition and give them this idea that they are a women of honor, and that God values them, respects them, and loves them. So that's kind of our message to them. We have a whole orality focus as well with our girls, because they are illiterate, so we can't just do a Bible study and read God's word together. So we use the orality method. So basically we pick 19 stories from the Bible that start Genesis and go all the way to Revelation, and it just really reveals God's redemptive plan for them, his purpose for them, his love for them. And we've seen girls come to faith, and it's just been a beautiful opportunity to just journey through life with them.
That's so cool. That's why I love c&ma, because it's not just showing compassion, it's bringing that discipleship aspect with it as well. Yeah. So you're doing that perfectly. Yeah. And you shared, while we were talking off camera, you shared a story of how that was put into play. Yeah. And so would you mind sharing that story with us?
Yeah. It's Kiatu's story. She's one of my, you're not supposed to have favorites, but she's probably one of my favorites too. She came up to us. She was in our program. She grew up in a Quranic school, so which means she didn't go to regular school, but she actually went to school to learn about the Quran, and with an imam, with their Muslim leader. And so she never got to go to regular school. Very, very devout family, Muslim family that she grew up in. When she was a teenager, she went off to work in the capital as a domestic worker, like a lot of our girls. And she ended up getting pregnant by her employer's son, and he refused to acknowledge the child as his. And her Muslim family completely cut her out of their lives. They sent her to come live in our city with some distant relatives, and she's pretty much their maid. And so she heard about our program, and she qualified for it, and so she began coming to our program. She was in our program about 2 years, And she came up to me after class one day and she said, Becky, they all call me Becky, I love it. But she's like, Becky, she's like, I want to understand more about your faith. I want to understand more what it means to be a Christian. And so I said to her, I said, if you're really serious about this, because we really want our girls, they're very vulnerable. So a lot of times they'll just tell us what we want to hear. And, but we really want, just the power of Jesus to be so real, what they're experiencing, what they're hearing to be so real that they want more, they want to understand more. So I said to her, I said, listen, I said, if you want to come to my house tomorrow, I said, let's sit down and we'll talk. And I want to hear more of your story. So she came the next day and I said to her, I said, what's changed in your life? Like, what is it? You've been with us 2 years. What's changed recently that's drawn you to Jesus? And she went on to tell me that she hadn't been able to sleep or eat for the last 2 weeks. She was just kind of just in turmoil. Wow. And she said every night she'd lay there trying to go to sleep and she'd think, okay, who's telling me the truth? Is it the Muslims? All this stuff I learned since I was a child that my whole family believes, or is it the Christians? And you guys keep telling us stories about Jesus and that he loves me and that he forgives me for getting pregnant out of wedlock. But I don't get that message from the Muslim community. And so she said, I really decided I wanted to kind of lay out this fleece. That's not the word she used, but she said, I decided just to kind of throw it out there. And she said, I decided to pray. I said, I prayed in Jesus' name like we do at our center. And I prayed that if Jesus was real, he would do this. He could answer this prayer for me. And she had a cousin that was taking a very difficult exam in Mali. He'd already failed it once. And in order to go on to university, he had to pass it. And so she prayed and asked that Jesus would help her cousin pass this test. And she said 2 days before, her aunt had come to her and said that her cousin had passed this test. And when her aunt told her that, she just this peace came over me and I didn't doubt anymore. I didn't wonder who was telling me the truth. I knew exactly where the truth was and what the truth was. And so that day in my yard, sitting in she accepted the Lord, and we've been able to work with her, disciple her, and just see her grow in her faith has just been really encouraging.
That's so cool. You were telling me about Sean's ministry too, and then obviously what you do through Hands of Honor. That's exciting what the Lord's doing. It is. And you're on the front line of doing that ministry, but we as a church, while we might not go over to Mali, Africa, some of us have, Pastor Stu, I was telling you about, did. But we want to be that church who partners with you in prayer and giving and just being able to be more aware of the needs of our world, especially what you're doing through Hands of Honor. So first, thank you so much for being used by the Lord. It's obvious that he's doing that, and praise be to him for sure. And also, how can we pray for you more effectively? So could you let us know how we could do that?
Yeah. We have really seen the power of prayer work miracles in our girls' lives. We had a gal last year that just really promised, that she just committed to pray for our girls. And she actually did a Bible study where you actually fast from food that you normally eat, and you eat food of the country you're praying for, and then the money you save on groceries and things like that, then you give towards that ministry. And so she began contacting us every week for prayer requests, and we shared the girls' names and their stories and specific prayer requests. And in the 40 days that this lady prayed in this study that she was doing, we saw 2 girls give their lives to the Lord, and nothing else changed in our program. We didn't do an altar call. We didn't have any kind of other activity that drew the girls in. It was just that we really believe it was a power of prayer, and this lady praying for our girls by name and for specific circumstances. Yeah. And so that's what prompted us to do what we're calling kind of prayer cards for our girls. And so we have a prayer card for each of our girls. We have 21 girls this year. And we have a prayer card for each girl that kind of tells their name and a little bit of their story and how you can be praying for them. And so I think I would just love to challenge anybody, if they really want to partner in a really powerful way with us, that would be the first thing that we would ask, is just take one of these cards and be praying for our girls and our ministry. And then the other way is just to partner. You can partner financially with us. We're on the c&ma Services website. Sean's doing awesome things. God's working powerfully in his ministry and working with malnourishment and teaching people livelihood through the fish farm. So it's a Jeganuma fish farm. You can find out about that on the website. For our Hands of Honor ministry as well. And one way that you can partner specifically with our family is through our support. And it's just like the Great Commission Fund. We have the c&ma Advance Fund. Yep. And so people can give us through c&ma Advance Fund to our support. And that would be a really good way to help us.
That's so cool. And we're going to talk about that as a church. You sent some prayer cards that we have here that we are going to make available after our services. Awesome. So hopefully all 17 of those cards that you mentioned earlier we'll take care of and we'll pray for. And I really hope our people can get behind it through fasting and prayer and through giving. And so we'll talk more about that. And any way that we can help you show mercy and put mercy into action, we want to be able to do that, because I just met you and heard from you and Sean. It's really cool what you're doing, and those are the types of things that we want to be a part of. And so however we can help,
we love that.
That'd be neat. So thank you so much, Becky, for taking time to be with us at church today.
All right, thanks. I loved it.
All right, great. We'll talk to you later.
Okay.
Bye.
All right.